Today we're going to complete the square. We're going to solve these equations by completing the square because sometimes you can't always factor things, right? Solving by factoring or solving by square roots is great, but you can't always do them. So completing the square is something you can always do, and so is the quadratic formula, which we'll learn eventually as well. So this example was in yesterday's warm-up, and I was like, oh, this might be a typo. It wasn't. It was there because we couldn't factor it, and I was just trying to fool you. But here, we're going to actually solve it by completing the square. So when you are completing the square, you want to isolate a and b. So anything that isn't x squared or x, you want to get on the other side of the equal sign. So in this case, we would get rid of negative 3 by adding 3 to both sides. So it would say x squared plus 10x on one side, and it would say positive 3 on the other. Now I'm going to leave some space because I know what we're about to do. We are going to complete the square. So we are going to add a term over here to turn this left side into a perfect square trinomial. But when you are doing equations, you know that you have to keep it balanced. So if I'm going to add something to the left side of the equation, I have to add it also to the right side of the equation. So remember yesterday how we found that c to turn it into a perfect square trinomial. You take b, which in this case is 10, you divide it by 2, and then you square it. So 10 divided by 2 is 5, and then 5 squared is 25. So we're going to add 25 to the left and 25 to the right. X squared plus 10x plus 25, it's a perfect square trinomial. Well, that's why we used it, which would factor to x plus 5 squared. So x plus 5 squared equals, over here, 3 plus 25 is 28. Now we had problems like this yesterday, near the end, but we get rid of the squared by square rooting. This would just give us x plus 5. 28 is not a perfect square, but it has perfect squares in it, so it could be 4 times 7. Oops, I'm going to write 4 first. 4 times 7, which the square root of 4 is 2, so 2 root 7. But remember, it can also be negative 2 root 7. Now, if you want, you can list this as two separate equations. X plus 5 equals 2 root 7, and x plus 5 equals negative 2 root 7. Or you can just keep it mushed as one. But there's still one more step. We have to get rid of this plus 5, so we would subtract 5 from both sides. So the way we're going to write this is x equals negative 5 plus or minus 2 root 7. You can't combine regular numbers with radical numbers when it's adding and subtracting. So you just leave them separate like that. But again, this shows you two answers. The way we wrote it is a perfect way that you can write your final answer. Or you could write it as x equals negative 5 plus 2 root 7 and x equals negative 5 minus 2 root 7. So that just lists them separately. Here it lists them together with the plus and minus sign. So that's the way I'm going to write it from this point forward. But hey, dealer's choice. Solve x squared plus 8x minus 20 equals 0 by completing the square. This one can be solved by factoring, but we're going to practice completing the square. First thing, we got to move this negative 20 to the other side, which means we would have to add 20. So we have x squared plus 8x, I'm going to leave a blank here to complete that square, equals positive 20 plus that same blank. To figure out the blank, we take our b divided by 2 and then square. 8 divided by 2 is 4, which this means when it's factored, it's going to be x plus 4 squared. But what is 4 squared? It's 16. So we'll say plus 16 over here, plus 16 over here. So we've got the left side handled. It comes out to x plus 4 squared. the right side, 20 plus 16 would be 36. How do we get rid of the squared? Yeah, the square root. So it cancels out on the left. X plus 4 equals. Square roots of 36 would be 6 and negative 6. Plus or minus 6. So if you're like, okay, let's get rid of the 4, we'll subtract the 4. X equals negative 4 plus or minus 6. Now we're actually going to go further on this one. We're not going to leave this as our final answer because we can combine. These are just regular numbers now. So we're going to set up two things, or we can just do them in our head too. We're going to figure out what negative 4 plus 6 is, and we're going to figure out what negative 4 minus 6 is. We just couldn't do that on the last one because the last one had a radical, so you can't combine with radicals, adding and subtracting, unless they're like radicals. So x equals and x equals. Negative 4 plus 6 is 2. Negative 4 minus 6 is negative 10. If you substitute either of these in the original equation, they both work out. And, like I said, this one you can factor. It would factor to x plus 10 and x minus 2. And then you get x equals negative 10 and x equals positive 2 this way. So, to me, factoring is easier. But we're learning completing the square because factoring is not always an option. All right, complete the square. We gotta get rid of that plus 12. So minus 12 on both sides. X squared minus 6x plus blank equals 22 minus 12 is 10, plus that same blank that we're gonna add. To figure out the blank, to turn it into a perfect square, take b, divide it by 2, and square it. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, which means the left side will eventually factor to x minus 3 squared. But to figure out what's in our blank, negative 3 times negative 3 would be positive 9. So on the right side, 10 plus 9 is 19. Great, we've done the hard work. Let's square root it. X minus 3 equals, 19 doesn't have any perfect squares in it, so let's just say plus or minus root 19. Last thing we have to do is get rid of that minus 3 by adding 3. X equals 3 plus or minus root 19. Nothing else we can do there, unless you wanted to list 3 plus root 19 and 3 minus root 19, that works, but you can't combine regular numbers with radicals with addition or subtraction. We got 2 more. This is almost getting fun. 2x squared minus 12x equals 14. Great, we've got the a and the b by themselves, we've got the c on the other side. But here's the change on this one. We have 2x squared. We can't have that. So what we're going to do is just divide it out. But if you divide one part of the equation by 2, you have to divide everything by 2. So that would give us x squared minus 6x. We'll leave some space. 14 divided by 2 is 7. And we'll leave our blank. We'll take our b, divide by 2, and then we'll square it as well. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, which this will factor to x minus 3 squared. Negative 3 squared is 9. 7 plus 9 on the right side gives us our 16. Okay, all right. Let's square root both sides. Why not? X minus 3 equals plus or minus, and the square root of 16 is 4. We get rid of our minus 3 with a plus 3, why not? X equals 3 plus or minus 4. So let's just do this one in our head. 3 plus 4 is 7. 3 minus 4 is negative 4. Wasn't too bad. Not too bad at all. 3x squared minus 6x minus 12 equals 0. So you could move the 12 first, or you know you're going to have to divide everything by 3 anyway, so it doesn't really matter the order you do that in. Let's divide everything by 3 first. So it'd be x squared minus 2x minus 4 equals 0. We'll add the 4 to the other side. X squared minus 2x plus blank equals positive 4 plus blank. To figure out that blank, we're going to take our b, divide by 2, and then we'll square it. Yeah. Negative 2 over 2 is negative 1, which means this will factor to x minus 1 squared. And negative 1 squared will give us positive 1 for both sides. Right side, 4 plus 1 is 5. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Square root of x minus 1 equals plus or minus. There's no square root of 5, and there are no perfect squares except for 1, so we'll just leave it at root 5. Add the 1. X equals 1 plus or minus root 5. Great. That's it. We tried 5 of them. It's time for you to practice 5 more.